Alright, so I don't even know how to start this, but I need to talk to someone about what's happening with my wife. I feel like I'm losing my mind here. Emily's always been a deep sleeper, but she never used to sleepwalk. That started about 3 weeks ago. At first, it was kind of funny. She'd get up, wander into the kitchen, open the fridge, just stand there like she was deciding on a snack, then shuffle back to bed. I'd guide her back without waking her up, like you're supposed to. No big deal. But then it started getting weird. I woke up one night around 2 a.m. and she wasn't in bed. I found her standing in the living room, just facing the wall, totally still. When I whispered her name, she turned around, but her eyes weren't open. Her lips moved like she was whispering, but no sound came out. Creepy as hell, right? I walked her back to bed, but the next morning, she didn't remember a thing. Then, a few nights later, I woke up again, and she was gone. This time, I found her outside, barefoot, in the freezing cold, standing in the middle of our yard. But she wasn't just standing there. She was staring up at our house, like she had never seen it before. Her head tilted side to side, like she was trying to understand what she was looking at. I stepped out onto the porch and called her name, and I swear to God, for a second, she looked straight through me, like she didn't know who I was. Then she blinked, shivered, and kind of swayed on her feet. I rushed over, put my arms around her, and she just whispered, "It's so cold." Why is it so cold? The thing is, it wasn't even that cold out. I took her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and asked what she was doing out there. She just frowned and said, "I don't know. I was dreaming, I think." But when I pressed her for details, she got this dazed look, like she was already forgetting. Since then, it's been happening almost every night. I've started staying up, trying to catch her before she goes outside, but sometimes she's too fast. And every time I find her, she's farther from the house. I don't know what to do. At first, I told myself it was just stress, or maybe a phase, some weird quirk of her sleep cycle that would pass. But it hasn't. It's only gotten worse. Every single night, without fail, Emily sleepwalks. I've started staying up later, pretending to scroll on my phone, just waiting for it to happen. And it always does. She moves so quietly. I barely even hear her get out of bed. But the second I notice she's gone, I already know where I'll find her. Somewhere dark, somewhere still, just standing there. And now, she's started whispering. At first I thought it was just random sleep talk, but it isn't. I started recording her at night, just to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. The first few recordings were mostly nonsense. Broken words, mumbling, stuff like "it's cold" or "almost time." But then, a few nights ago, I caught something that made my stomach drop. Clear as day, in this low, breathy voice that didn't even sound like her, Emily said, "Yes, I understand. I'll come soon." Who the hell was she talking to? I didn't wake her. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there, listening to her breathing until it evened out again. The next morning I asked if she remembered anything. She just gave me this weird, tired smile and said, "I think I had a dream, but I don't remember." But it's not just the sleepwalking anymore. She's different during the day too. It's like she's distracted, half there. She forgets little things, where she put her phone, what we ate for dinner the night before. And sometimes I catch her just staring, not at anything in particular, just at the corners of rooms or the top of the stairs, like she's waiting for something to happen. And the worst part? I checked our Nest camera. I thought it would help, thought I'd be able to see what she was doing after she left the house. But last night, when I pulled up the footage, my stomach clenched. The second she steps past the driveway, the camera glitches. Not just a little static or a lag, full on distortion. Warped lines, black frames, the kind of glitch you'd see in a horror movie before something bad happens. It only lasts a few seconds, but when the footage clears up, Emily's gone. I don't know what to do, and I sure as hell don't know where she goes. But I think I need to find out. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was happening to Emily, and it wasn't just sleepwalking. I waited for the right moment to ask her about her dreams. I didn't want to freak her out, but I needed to know what was going on inside her head when she slept. At first, she acted like she didn't know what I was talking about, but then, after a long silence, she finally admitted it. She wasn't just dreaming. She was talking to something. She didn't know what it was. She could never see it clearly, but she knew it was there, standing in the backyard, watching her. Every time she closed her eyes, it was waiting, never moving, never speaking out loud, but whispering to her in a way she could somehow still hear. The way she described it made my skin crawl. A shadowed figure, just standing at the edge of the trees, always facing her. At first it was barely noticeable, lost in the dark. But every night, it felt closer, not moving, not reaching for her, just there, like it was waiting for something. I asked her what it wanted. She hesitated, looking down at her hands, like she wasn't sure if she should even say it out loud. But she did. She told me she thought it wanted her to go with it. I haven't slept since. At this point, I knew I needed proof, something concrete to make sense of this nightmare. I set up more cameras, not just outside, but inside the house too. One in the bedroom, one in the hallway, one facing the backyard. I even put my phone on the nightstand with the recording app running, just in case. The next morning I sat down to check the footage. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe just more of the same. Emily sleepwalking, standing in strange places, whispering to nothing. But when I clicked on the backyard camera, my breath caught in my throat. Emily was outside again, barefoot, her nightgown billowing slightly in the wind. But this time, she wasn't just standing there. She was talking. Her lips were moving, forming actual words, her body shifting slightly, like she was reacting to someone speaking back to her. There was no one there. I kept watching, my pulse hammering in my ears. Her face was calm, like she was having a normal conversation. But when I skipped ahead in the video, just a few seconds at a time, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. She wasn't alone. I couldn't see anything, not really. But there was this distortion, like a shimmer in the air, right in front of her. The kind of warping you see of a pavement on a hot day, except it was midnight in our freezing yard. It wasn't visible the whole time, but every so often, a frame would catch it, just a flicker, a suggestion of a shape standing in front of her. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the audio. I enhanced it, boosting the levels, filtering out the wind. At first, all I could hear was Emily's voice, soft, distant, like she was agreeing with someone. And then, underneath it, a second voice. Deep, warped, wrong. It wasn't loud, but it was there. A slow crawling sound, like something trying to form words with a mouth that wasn't meant to speak. My skin prickled as I listened, straining to make out what it was saying. And then, suddenly, it became clear. It knew my name. I slammed my laptop shut so hard I nearly broke it. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. It wasn't just Emily sleepwalking. It wasn't just some weird parasomnia episode. She was communicating with something, and now, whatever it was, it knew about me. After that, things got worse. Emily stopped eating much. She'd pick at her food, barely taking a few bites before pushing it away. She stopped talking as much, too. Sometimes she'd just trail off mid-sentence, like she forgot what she was saying. But the worst part was the way she'd tilt her head, eyes slightly narrowed, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. It wasn't just at night anymore. I'd walk into the room and find her standing by the window, staring at the tree line, unmoving. I'd say her name, and it would take her a second, just a second too long to react, like she was pulling herself back from somewhere else. I started sleeping with the lights on. Not that I got much sleep anyway. Every night I'd jerk awake, expecting to see her standing in the doorway, or worse, staring down at me from the side of the bed. I started keeping my phone in my hand, ready to record, ready to do something. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. Last night, I woke up, and she was gone. Not just out of bed, not in the kitchen, not in the hallway, not outside in the yard. I checked the cameras, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. The live feed was up, all the cameras working, except for the backyard one. The screen was black. No error message, no disconnection notice. Just gone. I don't remember falling asleep. I had promised myself I wouldn't, swore I'd stay up all night if I had to. But exhaustion has a way of creeping in, and at some point, my body just gave up. When I opened my eyes, my heart already knew what my brain hadn't caught up to yet. The bed beside me was empty. I jumped up so fast my vision blurred, barely remembering to grab my phone before I ran for the door. I already knew she wouldn't be in the house. I didn't even bother checking. I threw open the front door, my breath fogging in the cold, and there she was, standing barefoot in the middle of the road, smiling. It was the kind of smile that didn't belong on her face, not in that moment, not in the dead silence of the night. It wasn't relief, or happiness, or even recognition when she saw me. It was knowing. Like she had figured something out, something I wasn't meant to understand. I ran to her, my pulse slamming against my skull. She didn't react, didn't blink, didn't even flinch when I grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the road. Her skin was freezing, her breath slow and steady, like she was still deep in some kind of sleep. I half carried, half dragged her back inside, slamming the door behind us. And that's when she laughed. Not awake, not fully, just this soft, breathy giggle, like she was dreaming about something funny. I shook her, trying to get her to snap out of it, but she only sighed and curled against the couch like I wasn't even there. My hands were shaking. My entire body was shaking. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Just sat there, watching her, waiting for the moment her breathing changed, for the moment she finally woke up. She didn't mention anything right away. She went through the motions in the morning, made coffee, barely drank it. I watched her carefully, trying to figure out how much of last night she remembered. Then, as if she was reading my mind, she finally looked at me and told me the truth. It had been teaching her how to leave her body. The thing in the yard, the one she had been dreaming about, if they even were dreams, it had been guiding her. Slowly, patiently. Every time she slept, it showed her more. She told me she was getting better at it, slipping away from herself for longer stretches of time. And one day, She wouldn't wake up. I don't know how I kept myself together after that. I wanted to shake her, to scream, to make her understand that this wasn't normal, wasn't okay. But she just looked at me with that faraway expression, like she had already accepted it, like this was just how things were now. I stopped letting myself sleep. I stayed up every night, forcing my eyes to stay open even when my body begged me to rest. I couldn't let her slip away again. I couldn't risk it. I drank so much coffee I thought my heart was going to explode. I sat upright in bed, phone in my hand, staring at her until the sun came up. But eventually, my body won. One evening, I closed my eyes for what felt like a second. Just 1 second. That was all it took. When I woke up, Emily was gone, and the front door was wide open. I ran outside without thinking, the cold biting through my clothes as my breath came in fast, panicked bursts. My mind was still shaking off the last traces of sleep. But I knew one thing. Emily was out here somewhere, and I had to find her before she went too far. The night was dead silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just the sound of my own heartbeat slamming in my ears as I scanned the yard. I half expected to see her standing in the road again, or maybe out by the tree line where she always seemed drawn. But she wasn't there. I turned, my stomach twisting itself into knots. That's when I spotted her. She was on the ground, not standing, not walking, just laying there. On the frozen grass a few feet from the porch, her body unnaturally stiff. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. Then, my legs finally moved, and I was running toward her, dropping to my knees beside her. Her eyes were open, wide open, staring past me, past everything, like she wasn't even there anymore. Her lips were moving, barely, forming silent words I couldn't hear. I grabbed her arms, shaking her, trying to snap her out of whatever was happening. That's when her whole body seized up. It was like a current ran through her, her back arching, fingers curling into claws as her limbs jerked violently. Her lips twisted, and this sound came out of her. A strangled, breathless whisper, like she was forcing words through a throat that didn't want to work. I couldn't understand all of it, but what I did hear didn't make sense. It wasn't in English. It didn't sound like anything I'd ever heard her say before. A low, stuttering murmur, like something ancient and broken, struggling to push through her clenched teeth. It wasn't just nonsense. It felt deliberate, like she was speaking to someone. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Her body went limp, her breath slow and shallow. Her eyes slid shut, her face slack. I called her name, louder this time, shaking her gently, trying to wake her. Nothing. Panic clawed up my throat as I scooped her up and carried her inside. She felt light, too light, like something had been pulled out of her. I laid her down in bed, pulling the blankets up to her chin, my hands still shaking as I brushed her hair back. Her breathing was steady. Her pulse was normal. But she wouldn't wake up. Not when I whispered her name. Not when I shook her, or tried to sit her up, or pressed my hand against her cheek. She was just asleep, or something close to it. I waited. The first few hours, I kept telling myself she'd wake up any second, that I'd shake her shoulder, say her name a little louder, and she'd stir, blink at me, maybe laugh off whatever the hell had happened outside. But she didn't move. She didn't even twitch. By morning, my hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold my phone to look up what I was supposed to do. She was breathing. Her pulse was steady. But no matter what I tried, cold water, louder noises, even lightly pinching her arm, She didn't respond. It was like she was just gone. I waited another full day, then another. By the second night, I couldn't take it anymore. I called an ambulance. I don't even remember what I told them. Just that my wife wouldn't wake up and something was really, really wrong. When the paramedics arrived, they did what I had done, checked her vitals, tried to wake her. Nothing. For a second, I thought they were going to tell me she was in a coma. But then, just as they were about to move her, her eyes fluttered open. She didn't react at first, just blinked slowly, staring at the ceiling like she didn't recognize where she was. Then she sat up, let them check her over. She answered their questions, said her name, said she felt tired but fine. I expected her to say something about what had happened, to at least ask why there were paramedics in our bedroom. But she just looked at me like I was a stranger. After they left, things changed. She stopped sleepwalking, stopped wandering outside. But something was off. She moved through the house like she was half awake all the time, barely spoke, barely ate. I'd catch her staring at nothing for long stretches of time, her head tilted like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. And she wouldn't look at me the way she used to. Then, one night, I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. A soft, rhythmic scrape, over and over. I turned on the bedside lamp, and my stomach dropped. She was standing over me. Her face was completely blank. No emotion, no recognition, just that same distant, empty stare. And in her hand was a knife. I don't know what snapped me into action. Maybe it was the way her fingers twitched around the handle, like she was still deciding what to do. I grabbed her wrist. Before she could react, twisted the knife out of her hand, sent it clattering to the floor. She didn't fight me, didn't say a word. She just stood there, blinking like she had just woken up from a dream. Then she turned and walked back to bed, lay down, and closed her eyes like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning I made the call. The paramedics came again. This time, they didn't leave without her. They told me she needed help, that they were taking her somewhere safe. She didn't argue, didn't even react when they led her out the door. Just walked past me without looking up. It's been days now. I don't know when she'll come home. I don't know if she'll ever come home. I keep thinking about the way she used to laugh, the way she used to smile when she thought I wasn't looking. I keep replaying everything in my head, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I lost her. I still don't know what happened to my wife, and I don't know if I'll ever get her back.